Here's my script. Could you read it?
Okay, yeah, and move that
Let's
script over
edit
here.
this part
Yeah.
out, okay? Going 10-1.
Rain dance, Sundance, con.
Let's do this.
You guys ready?
Quiet Thank you
on
so
set.
much for this award. Ready and action.
Welcome back to Mel Moment Mondays. I'm your host, Mel, and today I'm joined with an LA-based actor and longtime friend of mine, Tanner Kerrins. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast.
Totally. Thanks for having me.
I know when I initially reached out to you, I think there was a little bit of a miscommunication, but I'm so glad you're like willing to like hop on as a guest and not as like, behind the scenes, although both would be cool.
Totally, yeah. I think in your first message it was something like, do you want to help out with my podcast? And I was like, okay, yeah, behind the scenes work. And then your next message was like, okay, I want to talk about this. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're talking about cool.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've like actually seen you in person. I feel like I know we grew up together kind of. I didn't actually know you while we were in the same high school, but it was kind of after the fact when like I think it was like Kayla that mentioned that I should talk to you because of filmmaking. So yeah, can you kind of discuss how you got into filmmaking and acting specifically? I know you went to like you studied film in school in California. So yeah, how did you focus more on acting rather than crew roles?
Totally. So, acting, funny enough, happened later in my life. But I think, when we met and ever since I was a little kid, I loved telling stories. I was the kid who had a camcorder making short films in the backyard. Um, I remember in middle school, it was like the first 7 or 8 pages of Raiders of the Lost Ark script and reading through that, and I started writing scripts in middle school. Um, but I've always wanted to be behind the camera. Acting, like I said, came later in life. Um, I think I fell into it, found some enjoyment with it, and just talked to the right people, and somehow had some success with it. That's been a couple of years ago now.
That's awesome. Can you kind of like explain the process of like how an actor would get picked up for roles? I know sometimes like getting into acting is like really intimidating, you think about all these like Hollywood A-list stars and you're like, how do I get there? But then, you got to think about like, if you're just most people I feel like start off on student film. So like how does that differ between, picking up a role for a student film versus maybe, a larger film? What's the process?
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned student films because I think student films are an incredible opportunity. Whether you're in your early 20s, you're in college, or you're 40, 50, you're thinking about acting later in life. I think short films are a great opportunity where, you can get material for being an actor. You can get clips to use in a reel. You can get headshots. My first headshot that I used for years was for a USC film. And that was just because one guy, I think it was the behind the scenes photographer, just had a nice camera. We stepped aside in our little holding area and he grabbed a couple photos. Um, I also think Facebook is a great place to start. I met a camera operator from Modern Family, by the guy, his name's Gavin, great guy. And when I was first getting started, he suggested looking at Facebook groups, job boards. Um, this was more for behind camera work, but I know now that there's plenty of groups for actors, if that's a route that people want to take. But yeah, just grabbing material, demo reel, headshots, getting a feel for what it's like on set. That's where it all starts.
How do you go? So once you find something that's interesting or someone reaches out to you, what will they normally ask you as an actor to give? And like, how do you film yourself for like a self tape and stuff like that?
Um, luckily, luckily the crew will usually have specific instructions for how to apply and what they're looking for. Um, Nowadays, I use Actors Access. Actors Access has a very nice system where they will break down the character and if the casting director likes you, they can just select your headshot, say, look, I would love you to film torso and up, give us your name, height, location. Those are usually the three things they ask for in a self-tape. Um, and yeah, they're usually the crew will have like stuff for you to send in. Sometimes it's really wild requests, like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of an example. One time I had to do an audition as a fish, and I just like arched my camera. I had it on tripod, looked down at me like flopping on the ground. That was a weird one.
And and
I,
then as for like callbacks, do you are callbacks usually? Would you say? I know with post pandemic, there's been a lot of Zoom stuff, but would you say it's mostly in person, or how do you get over the nerves for getting a callback for something bigger?
um, you are right. Since the pandemic, everything's been virtual. A lot of callbacks that I get are just through Zoom calls. Um, I I actually appreciate callbacks more. I think when I first started acting, it was very obvious that I was anxious, whether that was the first tape I sent in or I got lucky and got a callback. Nowadays, I look at a callback as an opportunity to see the people that I'm working with. Because again, for anyone who is considering acting, I think I look at auditions sort of like a job interview. Like not only are they interviewing me, but I'm sort of interviewing them. I see if, it's a project. Um, Everything that I got in the breakdown, again, breakdowns for actors usually have all that information. Um, but callbacks are nice, because you can actually see the crew that you're going to be working with. You can oftentimes see the director and see how they give direction. Um, but since the pandemic, it's been mostly Zoom calls. I don't really have a preference if it's in person or on Zoom. I see it as sort of the same process.
Gotcha. That's so interesting. I know I've never thought about going into an audition as you're also interviewing them.
Yeah,
I feel like that's really important too because you think I feel like a lot of people just take any opportunity, which at a certain level is great. But
yeah,
if you don't vibe with whoever is casting you, or the director, you're like, like the message behind whatever this thing is not great. Like you can kind of
yeah.
vet that out.
Some piece of advice that someone told me, which I think gives me a lot of confidence going into auditions, is that um, you are trying to be the solution to the production's problem. Whenever you go into an audition, you could say that the production has a problem. They are looking for someone to fulfill a role. They don't have that person. You could be that person. And sort of that perspective of seeing like, I'm here to see if I can fulfill that job for them. That sort of takes the stress away from me because again, I'm not stressed about like giving an Oscar winning performance, trying to wow everyone. I'm just trying to get in, do the job, see if, we vibe, and then that's it.
So interesting. Yeah, no, that's super important and a good way to look at it. And then as far as like agencies and management and all of that, publicists, all this crazy stuff that everyone talks about, I feel like do you think you need that to succeed, or how would one go about finding, let's say, an agent? Because I know that's really hard starting out if you don't have anything in your repertoire, right? Like how do you pitch yourself?
Um, well, I actually just got my commercial agent. I say just like in this last year. Um,
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah. Um, in all seriousness, though, I don't think people need an agent, or I should specify, I don't think you need an agent if you're starting off. And I would go a step further to say starting off being like the first 3, 4, maybe 5 years you start acting. Um, I definitely think that having an agent helps, but it adds a lot of stress because you're basically trying to sell yourself to a production. And I think that's sort of the distinction between like how I started and where I am now. Um, my agent really helps me get a ton of auditions. Um, but I don't know, maybe I like sort of the grassroots vibe of self-submitting myself. Um, the short answer is yeah, I don't think people need an agent right off the bat, let alone a publicist, uh, any of those roles. Um, unless you're like an A-list star and you actually need to like think about what you look like walking outside, then yeah, maybe consider finding a publicist. But until
Right.
then,
And what's kind of the difference between agencies and management? I know those are like slightly different.
right. Trust me, I've had to do plenty of research myself. To my knowledge, agents have a large roster, plenty of actors that they're looking at, and their job is just to get you roles. They're trying to market you. Um, as morbid as it sounds to me, I would say it's much more a marketing thing. You're trying to project these actors that you have under your wing. Managers are a bit different. They have a much smaller collection of actors that they represent. Um, and they work on much more of managing your career. It's much more one-on-one. They will actually say like, "Hey, you self-submitted to this role. It was great for your career. Now you should look at getting a publicist because stepping outside, that's something we need to consider." They're much more, like I said, one-on-one, looking at your overall career and your personal growth.
Gotcha. That's so interesting. Yeah, I feel like if you're new in this, like they kind of sound the same, but they do very different jobs.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The process of finding them though is sort of I think you sort of alluded to it. Like finding my agent right now, I definitely sent out like a few dozen cold calls, emails. Um, Manager is sort of the same. I think the only reason I got in contact with the manager recently is because I met someone on set.
Fair.
Yeah.
And then
Um,
I know you take on primarily a lot of like background roles on some bigger projects, which are super fun. And I feel like being a background actor is like kind of a very overlooked job. I mean, with the in light of all the strikes that have been happening, I feel like it is being brought more to the forefront, which it should be.
yeah.
Um, and what do you think makes a good background actor? How should you act on set as a background actor?
If we're talking just background acting, I would say uh, have have an extreme amount of professionalism. Um, because I still am a part of background casting agencies. There's a popular one in the Southern California area called Central Casting. I think it's also in Atlanta and New York. They cast like I want to say 70 to 80% of all TV shows and
Oh
movies. Like
wow.
it's insane. But like any actor, even people behind the scenes, you probably heard of Central Casting. Um, I know people that I still run into on set doing background roles, treating it like they're a principal actor, which is just not the way to go about it. Um, it's great that you talk about background acting as well because I still do background acting. I think I've had a great amount of opportunity with just background acting. It'll get you on set. It's a paycheck. Um, but at the end of the day, I think you need to be professional. Realize that it's not a principal role. Um, like any actor, you should be able to take direction. That's one of the big similarities that I've seen. Um, Background actors who are in the industry for a long time take direction like they would a principal actor. They're like, "Oh, you need me to move here? Sit down. Simple." You know, that professionalism will get you pretty far. And background acting, I think you're right that a lot of people it's much more in the main. We have much more of a spotlight on it now. I know from the Screen Actors Guild, which I'm a part of, that since the strikes happened, background actors actually got like the highest pay raise. Um, it's definitely a needed position that I don't think people realize.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, I feel like background actors definitely without them, they you need people on set to bring the atmosphere to a scene, and they definitely do.
Definitely.
And kind of in terms of like moving up the ranks per se, in acting, how would one kind of move up the rank from like maybe from a student film to like, just like either being a lead in like an indie feature, or like you worked as a background actor in like Barbie and Blue Beetle and the TV show Hollywood, stuff like that. Like how would you move up? And is it just networking, or is it through your agent, or kind of explain that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I actually really like this question because in the past year or two, I think I've been questioning it myself. Um, I would say yes, a lot of it is networking. You mentioned Barbie. I'm super thankful for my 3 second moment on Barbie. Um, but I think the only reason that people actually like see my face and can point out like there's Tanner and Barbie, um, is because I talked with the first AD. I remember it like it was yesterday. We were on set just doing background stuff. I was supposed to be someone in the way back of the beach. You never see me. Um, but I was talking with Tom Brewster, who I learned later was their first AD. And when they got to that point of the day filming these little vignettes in the park, he was like, "You, I remember you." Um, in terms of going up the ranks, like networking, finding those small moments, I would also say make your own stuff. I just finished my first feature-length film, which I not only wrote, but I gave myself a small supporting role, and I'm directing it. Um, that project I'm really proud of. I know it's not the best, but I know that I can bring it up to my agent and be like, "Hey, I'm still getting work done, even on the off season." I think that's something that a lot of actors miss, at least if we're talking agents. Like just keep making stuff, keep talking to people. That's the only way that you can make those connections and learn and grow and get to those higher roles that people sort of strive for.
Right. Is there a way that you yourself or have advice on like kind of standing out? Because I know like on set when there's like it's 100 plus crew and you're like talking to someone, how do you make yourself like the person that where they'll pick you out for that 3 second shot in Barbie? Like how
Right.
how do you market yourself? I guess is the question.
Um, I would say be grounded and don't force it. Like I said, I've been sort of questioning the process the past couple of years, and I found a surprising amount of success um not pushing it. There's plenty of actors again that I've seen in background roles pretending it's a principal role. That just feels forced, it looks fake, and you know, the the only way to I think market yourself is to be authentic. You know, um, even though we're acting, plenty of actors that I look up to talk about being authentic and being present. And I think whether you're playing a character in front of camera or you're just talking to the camera guy when they cut, um, both of those transition over. And again, those are the moments that people are going to remember. I remember my conversation with Tom Brewster more than I remember the actual clip in Barbie.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's the little moments that you don't always think are important, but are super important in the end.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then you mentioned earlier that you're part of SAG-AFTRA, which is the actors union here in
Right.
America. Um, how would an up-and-coming actor get into the union? I know it's kind of like almost like I don't know, a little convoluted
A
where,
catch
to get into
22.
the union, yeah, to get into the union, you need to be in the union,
Mhm.
but you aren't. So how would you do that?
Well, if the birds outside my window don't interrupt my answer, um, it's so loud over here. I hope it doesn't transition over. Um, yeah, joining the union. I still think it's a catch 22. You are right. It's very contradictory. Being a part, you need to be a part of the union to join the union, but you can't do union projects if you're not in the union. Um, if anyone is considering joining the union, I'm a firm supporter of unions, especially the Screen Actors Guild. I think they're I'll admit there's a couple productions that I look back on and I'm like, that was not safe, or I was not comfortable with that. Now, since I'm a part of the union, I can't imagine going back to non-union work. Um, but if anyone is considering joining the union, I would say research it, find ways to sort of circumvent the rules. Um, I got lucky and I went in as a non-union background actor on a union short film. Talked with the director, and he gave me one line. And I will remember that one line is the funniest line ever. But it next thing you know, I'm signing a different contract because I was technically a SAG principal actor.
Mm.
Um, that's one way to do it. I know a gentleman who they made their own feature film, again, super low budget, non-union, and they later brought it to the union to try and get it uh um oh gosh, I'm blanking on the term. They tried to give it a union status. That is also a way. As soon as you say your project is union, everyone who falls under it, even though they were probably non-union to start. Um, One of the most common ways I've seen is getting vouchers from background work. I know plenty of actors who would go up to production assistants after a shooting day and just say, "Hey, do you have any extra vouchers? Any extra union vouchers?" Um, if anyone's considering joining the union, just know that there are ways to join it. But it can be sort of daunting because it, it it doesn't make sense like being a part of the union to join it that confusion.
Right, right. And you said these vouchers, how many of them do you have to get before you're technically, or I guess there's a form after you have enough vouchers. I kind of explain that to then, actually get processed into the union.
Correct. So the rule is three. Last time I checked, it's three. I I don't see them changing that from our contract, SAG contract. But once you get three vouchers, you usually fill out a form. I forget what it's called. I just want to call it like a SAG intake form. Um, but essentially, what you would do is you would list out all the projects where you were bumped up to a union background actor, and you label like the director. You show proof of the production, usually a pay stub or the actual. They'll give you a copy of this voucher, this work voucher. Um, and then once you're ready to join the union, you just present all of that in like a folder and they'll get back to you in some odd business days. There's a fee to pay to join the union. You also have to pay that. Um, but once you have all that in, it's like cool. Now you're in the union. You get the little card and everything.
Do you think it opens up more opportunities or it limits them? Because I know you are restricted to, you can't necessarily act like on a non-union student film anymore.
Right.
Do you think that's really limiting? Or, I mean, at that point, you're doing bigger stuff, but if it's like your friend's thing, like,
Yeah.
do you, like, would you work around that, or can you, or?
So I think I wouldn't say it limits opportunities. I think it opens up to better opportunities if you join the union. Um, because you will be working on bigger budget productions. Like if I was non-union, I don't think they would care about me and Barbie. I would still be, I think the role was like park goer. You would just be in like giant cattle calls. Um, in terms of like not doing non-union films, I think there are opportunities that you can still do. Like I still do student films, which are technically non-union, but they're student films. Like I don't have to report that to the union. If I have a friend on the production, I'll usually say, yeah, I'm volunteering to do this production. Um, I can hear my SAG rep getting worried, but I think if you intentionally do a non-union project and SAG hears about it, then they can be like, hey, and if you do it multiple times, then they can be like, okay, now we really need to penalize you. Um, but I would just say, I still can't imagine going back to non-union productions. Student projects, I still do that because I just see it as a learning opportunity.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Yeah, I mean, student projects are fun. I feel like it's like kind of a time where you can kind of experiment with things without having a big repercussion. But then also obviously get like the bigger work, you know,
There's
at the
plenty
same
of
time.
productions that I've done that are plenty of student productions I've done that are just very artistic films. Um, I've done two with USC recently, which are on my acting reel, which I just think are like weird and abstract and things that I want casting directors to see. This doesn't really add to a question that you had, but again, for people considering acting, find out what roles you want to play, what roles you're good at, and have material for every type of role. Like if you have comedic stuff, dramatic stuff, the abstract, weird stuff, I love presenting that to casting directors because something about that I think sort of gives me more credibility of being an actor. It's like a weirder job. It shows like more acting prowess.
Right. That's really interesting, being like kind of more well-rounded instead of I know people can kind of get stuck in one genre and start getting typecasted for only that. So yeah, I think it's really important to branch out. Yeah.
Totally.
And then as I feel like as an actor, this is one of the biggest things that is I guess semi a worry. But how do you not have imposter syndrome when you get certain roles, and but then also have confidence that no, I do deserve this, but at the same time not letting your ego run away where you're obviously pretending, or you feel like you're the star and get
Yeah.
kind of cocky. How do you, I guess, checks and balances with all these emotions?
Uh, I can tell you first off, there's no room for ego on a film set. I got an incredible opportunity to work with the stunt double for Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther, and he said that exact words on a short film we did. He said, there's no room for ego. We're just here. We're just people. And having imposters, I always have imposter syndrome. Um, there I think the past year someone asked what I do for a living and I felt uncomfortable to say acting. Um, so I'll actually like say, "Oh, I do marketing because I'm marketing myself." I don't know. Um, but in all seriousness, I look at a ton of actors uh who inspire me not only to perform to the best of my ability, but to sort of keep me grounded. There's plenty of actors that I look up to who they talk about have you know don't have ego, but understand that you are an actor. You're going in to do a job. Um and again, sort of framing it in the way that it's just a job, I'm just getting it in, um, takes away that stress of it's something monumental. I'm the principal actor, everyone is looking at me. It sort of takes away all of that.
I mean, it's just, it's like I'm not an actor myself, so this is like a totally different side of filmmaking that I always think it's like really interesting and really unique because it's such a a different like journey to get where you want to go compared to,
Yeah,
let's say, like being a director or cinematographer. It's very
it's a
different.
really weird job acting.
But sometimes I get jealous. Like y'all look like you're having so much fun sometimes.
I think that's a key takeaway. I mean, it is a fun job. It's stressful, but the actors that I look up to, the ones that have, I would say, longevity in that career, I have this innate ability to just have fun with it, to be present in the moment. Again, no ego. They're not focused on what happened 2 weeks ago and what's happening a month from now. Like, you know, um, it's just fun. And a lot of the characters, this is another reason why I suggest joining a union. Um, I love the characters that I get to play because I feel like the projects that I look for now have a lot of dynamic characters and I can play with range of emotions. And again, it just improves us as people.
Whole
Yeah.
rounded people. We love that.
Yeah.
So kind of to shift from the questions that I've been asking, we're gonna now play the film Would You Rather. It's only one
Cool.
question, but it kind of pertains to acting. So would you rather act in a Marvel film? Or I know it's the last season, but would you rather act in Stranger Things?
Well, I've already appeared in two Marvel productions, so I feel like my answer is going to be kind of biased. Sort of one-sided, I mean. But I do love Stranger Things. I think that show since it came out has been expertly executed and like I said, dynamic characters. I love everyone on there. Um, it just looks like a fun time.
So what would you choose though if you had to pick one? I know this is hard.
Oh, to be in a Marvel film or Stranger
Yeah,
Things? Stranger Things.
Stranger Things.
Yeah. I love Marvel, but I've already done it, you know. I want to experiment with different roles, and I feel like Stranger Things, like I said, is very fun. It's very colorful and inventive. Um, that's from like acting and I think cinematography, set decoration. Yeah, I really love that show.
I'm excited for the last season to come out. It's been definitely something marinating over the last couple of years.
I haven't heard someone describe it as marinating.
I feel
Way
like it's
more.
been marinating. I mean, like, think about it. It's been like
Maybe
two
maybe I'm
years,
just getting old now.
aren't we all? And then kind of the final question to wrap it up real quick
Mhm.
is if you could tell your younger self, what advice would you give them about
Mhm.
getting into film, getting into acting, kind of joining this really crazy ride, which is
Yeah.
entertainment?
What did I tell them? Realize it's not gonna happen overnight. There's gonna be a lot of brutal days. It's a lot of long hours, a lot of uh people who are stressed about time and money and um look for those small moments on film. Look for those small moments where you're on a student production, they cut the camera and someone cracks a joke and everyone's laughing. I love those small moments. Um, I feel like I'm sort of going a bit of a left turn, but yeah, I would tell my younger self, realize that it's not going to happen overnight. Just enjoy the process, um, and just be open-minded. You know, regardless if we're talking about acting or if someone wants to be a cinematographer, they want to be a director, they want to be a writer. Um, learn wherever you can. Read books. You know, watch videos with your favorite actors, having interviews talking about their process. Um, you know, just sit at a coffee shop, people watch.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. I know this was like super last minute, but I really love hearing from you and kind of hearing the deeper insight in what you've been doing with all this acting for the past like couple years, almost 10 years. I feel like at this point.
Oh gosh, has it been that long? Oh God, I am getting old.
How can people find you on social media?
Well, I have my Instagram, just my name at Tanner Kerrins. I have an IMDb page. I started self-publishing a couple of books, so if they search up my name on Amazon, they can probably find my two books. Um,
What are they called?
the first one I wrote is called Run Program, and it's the best way I can describe it is a very genius college student. They lose a family member, and instead of going through the grieving process, they build what is artificial intelligence and then decide if they need to try and keep it alive or not.
Ooh.
Second one, I just recently published is called Dark Sands and Sweethearts. It's more so of a science fiction adventure story, traveling through space, much more comedic, in my opinion. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll put those in the link down below. And then just thank you again. Yeah.
No, thank you. Good to see you, Mel. I'm happy to be a part of this.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to learn more about my experience as an up-and-coming filmmaker or catch up on more episodes, follow me on Instagram at MELYDE12. This podcast is also available on Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and spread the word. Thank you guys again, and that's a wrap.